right. Hi, everybody. I'm Christy Walker, Director of Children's Ministries at Resurrection West, our Olathe location. Welcome.
Nice. And hi, everyone. My name is Blake Thomas. I'm the pastor of student ministries at Church of the Resurrection, our Olathe location. And we're so excited to talk about high schoolers with you today. And I'll admit, I'm not a parent. I only have a cat and a wife. And so I will not be offering any parental advice today. But what I do as a youth worker is I look at trends. I read stats. I'm going to share some of that with you today. And I'm going to leave the parenting advice to Christy because she's great at that.
Well, thank you, Blake. Yes, we're talking about high school. These are these 4 far off years that if you're a parent always seem to be way out there. We've got plenty of time to get ready for. Well, my husband Cliff and I, we are the parents to 3 kids. We have a 2nd grade boy, Berg, 7th grade daughter, Tess, and we have a 10th grader, Joe. So high school is here for us. We're in the thick of it. And to be honest, there is definitely a heightened feeling of urgency in using the time that we have left to influence our teen, this feeling of we just want to get it right for him and for all of our kids. So I'm glad that we're talking about this. With our kids now in high school, there's a lot of new and change, right? They've got new friends and new opportunities, and in light of COVID, maybe lost opportunities and friendships that haven't been fostered. So those have maybe fallen by the wayside. But in high school, there's new freedoms and also new pressures. So how can we as parents show up for our kids within all this awesome, but sometimes scary new stuff? And that's what we're going to discuss a little bit in this session. So we're going to go over our role as parents, the changes that are happening in our kids, as well as 4 conversations, important conversations we should be having. So let's talk about our role. So at this point, our role in showing up for our children, it's been a lot of things, all important in influencing their future. But in this phase of high school, we're looking more at the approaching freedom of our kids. So the word we're taking on, or this idea that we're taking on in our parenting role, is to equip, to prepare, to mobilize is a fun word, to send them out with all this potential that they have as young people. We want to send them out to do and to become with a tool belt that God's helped us give them. But while we want to send them out, we also want to do this and not mistake our role as being one that disengages or steps back. Our kids need our availability, our involvement and engagement now more than ever. They need our hugs. So we show affection to our teenagers a little differently than we did to them when they were in preschool. But don't be mistaken, they need hugs and affection. They need eye contact. They need our questions. They need us to be on hand for them, to keep fighting for their heart, as we sometimes say, cheering them on and believing in them. Believing in our kids, it's a lot easier when they're in high school if we understand what is going on with these kids. These changes that are happening. Who is this new creature that's all of a sudden in our home, this remarkable questioning, they want to be trusted with everything because they totally got it person. So let's talk about some of those changes. There's 4 fundamentals that are true for everyone, and those are the physical, the mental, social, and emotional. So real quick, what's happening physically with our high schoolers, our teenagers? The guys are getting taller, smellier, hairier. They're filling out, gaining muscle mass. Their voices are changing, and there's likely increased acne too. And girls, the girls are going to be reaching their adult height, a lot of them midway through high school. So all of a sudden we've got these adults in our home. They look like adults. And also sleeping patterns are changing. So just like in middle school, this kind of has started. They're staying up later. They might be struggling to fall asleep before 11 p.m., but yet they still need 9 hours of sleep and exercise every day. So that's just a little bit of the changes that are happening physically.
And then there's like the mental aspect, which I always classify the mental aspect as what are we thinking? How do teenagers think? And one big thing is that teenagers are highly self-aware. And constantly that perception of everyone is watching me or thinking about me is true for high schoolers. Many generational Z students think that they are always judged to half or high expectations, either of themselves or from others. And 4 out of 10 teens that they say that they are internally or externally pressured. A lot of that comes with technology and social media, which Christy and I will talk about in a second. But we got to do something with that. Another kind of like mental traits that are starting to develop is that students are able to focus better and organize information, but they're also discussing kind of more world events and current affairs better. And students are seeing their news on their phone in images. They aren't watching the news; they're seeing the news by graphics, um, and they're talking about those world experiences. Students as they get all older, they're also wired for more risk-taking experiences. I've seen that in good and bad ways on mission trips and stuff like that. I'll say no, don't do that, and it just happens, and doesn't always end out well. But they are learning kind of their limits in a new way, and that's true for relationships as well. Um, but one thing too characteristic that's starting to develop is that they are starting to discern what long-term thinking looks like. And a word for that as Christians we use is discernment, how to discern and figure out things with God. And especially for high schoolers, that big kind of question for them is, what is that post-grad decision? What is that college or post-grad experience that I'm supposed to move into next? And there's those students that know instantly right from the start, I'm going to this college to study this thing. And then there's other students that maybe will apply to 15 colleges and search 15 different degrees and then decide 2 years in. Everyone processes and thinks differently. They are trying to discern and figure those things out.
Hmm. Very true, Blake. Thank you for that. Shifting to socially. So our kids are going through some changes socially. They are starting to desire responsibilities that will increase their freedom. Just the other day, my 16-year-old, who's now driving, he offered to go run errands for me. Was begging to go to the store. Do I need something from the store? Anything, mom, from the store. He was just wanting to exercise some of that freedom and go and be on his own. And so that was something new. I hadn't experienced that before. Also, teenagers, our high schoolers, they want to feel ownership for their personal decisions. So we are experiencing this, right? They want to make their own decisions. They want to feel like they have the empowerment to make their own personal decisions. They can tend to be self-focused, busy, and unavailable, but they're also beginning to show respect for others' opinions. They're willing to compromise, and this is kind of a shift now from middle school. So they're becoming more aware also of others and wanting to have a mutual respect for others and have that respect for themselves from others for themselves too. Chances are they're starting to date or they're becoming interested in dating. They're becoming increasingly interested in their expression in this way. And then also socially, we all know this now, they may experience depression, or if not within themselves, they may definitely experience it within their friend groups. Um, and so those are just a few of the changes that we're going to be experiencing socially with our high schoolers.
And Christy, I think that's a great segue into talking about that emotional aspect, which is so important too. That question of what are students feeling? We've had the thinking, we've had the what are they experiencing, how are they changing, but what are they feeling in their hearts? And we could have a whole session on the emotions and especially on mental health with teenagers, which is so important. But I'll just highlight a few things. One thing that is characteristic of generational Z and millennials is that they have a more openness to feel. I've heard a lot of older generations, people in older generations say to me and about younger generations is that, oh, your generation is just too emotional or they feel too much. And the truth is it's not that they're more emotional. It's just that Generation Z feels more free to articulate feelings. This generation has access to better resources. They're seeing mental health talked about in a new way on shows and TVs, or they're talking about it with their friends or with trusted adults or church leaders. That's a good thing that's happening. But with that comes a responsibility of, well, what do we do with that? And how do we foster those effective and good spaces for students to talk about their emotions and to talk about mental health? Another common emotion that a lot of Generation Z students feel is tiredness.
Mm.
And 3 out of 5 students claim that they feel tired a lot or some of the time. And a characteristic that's also true about Generation Z is that they are the busiest generation we've seen. Activities and involvement, they look completely different than they look like in the past. And there's a lot of expectations and success that comes with that. But it means that students are more tired. As a youth pastor, I've received text on days that we have church activities from students that say in a very apologetic way, I'm so sorry I can't come to this, or I'm so sorry that I can't come to youth group. It's because I'm so tired, or I have to get things done, or I'm just so exhausted or burnout, or I need to prioritize this. And as a youth pastor, I have 2 thoughts that come to my mind with that. The first is that I'm sad that they can't come to church. I'm sad that they can't be with a community of people that love them. And I'm sad that there are things that do take precedence over the church in their life. But I'm also sad that they are so exhausted. They're teenagers. And one thing I try to encourage among teens is balancing and practicing good mental health practices and learning boundaries and finding out what is appropriate self-care so that when I am feeling those feelings of I'm so tired, it doesn't take as much of a toll emotionally and mentally. So I thought that was a super interesting fact I read this past week. 3 out of 5 teenagers say I'm just tired.
Yeah. That's so helpful to be aware of those. And I hope those of you listening, as you're listening to these changes that are going on in our high schoolers, maybe you've even heard them and you're remembering when some of that was happening to yourself. So understanding these changes and anticipating them, looking for them, it'll enable us to better love and nurture our high schoolers through these changes. So, what do we do with them all? One thing to do is to have conversations. In the busyness of life, time to talk with our high schooler seems like shrinking. It's just getting smaller and smaller. We have less and less time, or it gets pushed to the back burner because of our busy schedule. So, let's talk about 4 practical times. And if you want to write these down, jot them down. 4 practical times to have conversations, or even small ones. Sometimes you can anticipate and plan for conversations. Sometimes you can. It's great to have margin to just have a conversation on the fly when it happens, but sometimes we can plan for them. So here are 4 times that you can anticipate. In the morning. Morning time, start with encouraging words. We can wait for the to-dos and get this done and don't forget this, and those things can wait. So I like to start the day with encouraging words. And even, I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but sometimes in the evening, the day before, we lose our tempers. Sometimes we go to bed and things weren't awesome. In the morning is a great time to apologize if we spoke more harshly than we needed to. So it's just a really sweet, fresh time that God's given us to say encouraging things as they're going out the door, or if you're going out the door before them, and to also apologize and start with a clean slate. So morning time is a great time to make sure you have time to talk. Meal times, connect regularly by scheduling time to eat together, even if it's just once a week. Maybe you're in transit. If your teen isn't yet driving, maybe you are driving them to their things. There are many things in the car, and maybe you're eating on the way. Have a conversation, turn off the radio, off the phones, and just talk together and schedule at least once a week to eat together and to talk together. One of the best times that I have discovered is bedtime. With their new sleep patterns, they might be staying up later. If your kids have jobs, they're staying up later, and they might be more talkative at night. So if you can, make yourself available, put some energy on reserve, plan for it to sit with them a while and talk. It might be a time that they want to process some things from their day, and they might be more open than in the busyness of the day. And then fourth is their time. You can strengthen your relationship by adjusting your plans and showing up when they need you. Remember, they are learning to plan, learning. It's going to take a while to plan and organize their time. They won't always get it right, and they might need you at a time that's not always convenient. So if you can show up for them when they need you. And that's kind of one of those to have margin and availability. So what do we talk about? We think that there are four really important conversations that matter, that we don't want to miss. And there's conversations that can always happen about, maybe the kids want to have conversations about we need gas money, or they don't want to talk, but we need to make time to talk about certain things. So the four things that we're going to talk about and have conversations around are health, about our relationships, about technology, and also about faith, authentic faith. So I'm going to talk a little bit to you. I'm going to talk about this with you about healthy habits. We want to help our kids have a healthy awareness, personal awareness about their mental and their physical health. So we're still going to the pediatrician once a year. We're getting our annual exams. And this is actually a great time for our kids to exercise their freedom. I have the kids list out a couple of questions that they want to ask their doctor or their dentist, and be the one to ask the doctor or the dentist those questions. And I've also stopped answering for my high schooler when the doctor is with them, and they have their annual exam. The doctor asks the questions and my kids answer. So those are some great ways to give them that ownership and feel empowered and give them some practice to talk to some of those professionals.
Christy, I'll never forget the first time I went to the doctor. It was my fourth day in my undergrad in college, and I went to school in Chicago. I was all by myself, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to ask. I didn't know how to explain my insurance card, and I had to like transport myself on the train on the way there. I didn't know where to go. It was so stressful. I wish I would have had that moment at some point to know what questions to ask the doctor. I had bronchitis on my fourth day of college. It was not fun.
Gosh. Oh, that does not sound fun. Right. So having these conversations and giving our kids practice. So let's talk a little bit about some prompts that I've found you can use that help me to start a conversation in a healthy way. So um, being active together, saying something like, "Would you like to go on a run with me? Would you like to invite the neighbors out to play frisbee? Do you want to go on a walk?" And I will say one of the best ways to get some exercise that's also having fun with our kids, and having fun is important, is tag. Believe it or not, kids are never too old to play tag. They love it. I don't know what it is. It's just like the ultimate game. And it's a really great workout. So grab the kids and get outside and play tag. Or if you get a yoga mat together with your kids and do a fitness video together, there's so many now in the midst of COVID videos that we could do. Another helpful thing to do in the realm of health is to work on healthy eating patterns together. Our kids are going to really pick up on what we're modeling. So, paying attention to the types of food we're putting on the table, and looking for nutritious and nourishing things. And like I said, even creating a meal together and cooking together. And then the last thing I want to say around health and is teenagers often need counseling for emotional support. There is a lot of change going on within them, and having some emotional support and coaching goes a long way. And what a gift to give our kids entering their adult life if we can allow them to have an open heart and mind toward counseling. So sometimes a way to approach this is to simply say, would you be interested in seeing a counselor about that? If you're getting a vibe that this is something that's really troubling your teenager, would you be interested in seeing a counselor about that, and sort of taking away the scary about that? So it's something to anticipate a little and ask yourself, when it comes to my high schoolers mental and physical health, who could help me monitor that this year? Now, relationships is kind of our next category, specifically integrity in our relationships. We want to coach our kids toward healthy relationships so they'll be able to establish a couple of things. We want them to have personal boundaries for themselves, but also practice mutual respect with other people. So it's kind of this dual development: personal boundaries and then mutual respect for others. And it's going to help set them up for intimate relationships moving forward, which we know they are beginning to develop more and more in high school. So some of the things that have been helpful for me, we want to give them a safe place to process their values. And for me, this might look like my saying, um, what do you think about that? Or how do they make you feel about yourself? If your kids are talking about relationships or the people around them, it gives them a safe place to process values, to reflect and evaluate what it is that they are experiencing and maybe what they're feeling. And it's asking questions. One of the best things that we can do for our kids, for our teenagers, is to ask questions and listen and give them that opportunity to process. Also, we want to express our authenticity. When we show a little bit of our vulnerability, it really goes a long way with our kids in understanding that we genuinely want to connect with them. So I'll say things like, "Thank you for telling me that," or "I'm so glad you asked me." Not trying to solve the problem all the time, or be a know-it-all and be able to give them the right answer, but simply saying, "I'm glad you're talking to me about this. I don't necessarily know what to tell you about that, but I'm glad you're sharing, and I want to keep talking to you about that." That is a form of us telling our teenager that by you talking to me is showing me love. And believe it or not, our teens still love us. And when they see that, man, just by sharing this with mom or dad, um, they are being loved from me by that, they will continue to share. And then here's another one. You want I want to always finish the conversation with room to pick it back up again. And this is great for I have trouble multitasking. So if I'm in the kitchen cooking and my high schooler comes in and wants to talk about this important thing, or he really wants to share this thing with me, I will have trouble focusing. And that's a time that I say, "I really want to talk to you about this," or "I really want to hear this from you. Can we talk about it a little later?" Or even if you have had a conversation and maybe it's frustrated you and maybe you're feeling a little hot and you don't want to smash the conversation, you need to probably stop talking about it. It might be a good time to say, "I want to keep talking about this with you. Can we talk about it again another time?" And sometimes that is all it takes, but it keeps the conversation going. And then finally, I will just say real quick, if your teen is dating, ask questions to help them think objectively about their relationship. Candid conversations. And this is maybe a time where you can share some of your own personal experiences that might be helpful to your child and in sort of that discernment, right? Like that you're talking about. How you might say, "How often do you still talk with your other friends?" Or, my husband, Cliff, has shared with our oldest, our high schooler, some of his personal experiences while he was dating in high school. And much of his high school time was in relationships. And he's been pretty candid about, in hindsight, he feels like he missed out on a little bit, on a lot of it, in having time to hang out with his friends, with his buddies, and doing some of that. So be thinking about that and having those good conversations. Always listening though, and always asking questions.
It makes me think about one resource is a book called Growing With. It's by Kara Powell, and it talks about a lot of those things, like what you just mentioned, Christy. Like how do we talk with our students and grow in our faith and grow in these conversations in an authentic, true way. So Growing With, it's a book by Kara Powell. Definitely recommend it. Um, I'm going to transition us a little bit, and I want to talk about technology. Technology, kind of that never-ending thing, that true thing that affects all teens. And just a reminder of the reality, this generation, they've never not known the internet or life without phones. That's how they navigate their reality, and there's no changing that. That's only, I don't know where it's going to go forward, but that's our future. So I want to hit you with some more stats. Bear with me. But this is what I was just reading this week about phone usage and screen time. And this is before COVID. So I know this is definitely probably increased since COVID. But this is what I found out this week. On average, teens spend about 7 hours and 22 minutes on a screen per day. On a screen per day. And teens spend roughly 5 hours and 15 minutes on their phones per day. And young adults, that's 18 to 21-year-olds, they spend just under 7 hours on their phones per day. And among men in Generation Z, they spend about 5 hours and 22 minutes on their phone, and women spend about 6 hours and 35 minutes on their phone. So you definitely see that increase. I don't know about you. I get the notifications on my phone every Sunday morning before church. This is like clearly God like speaking to me. What's your average screen time that week? And I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to share that with you, what the past 3 weeks have told me. So 3 weeks ago, I spent on average 1 hour and 14 minutes on my phone. That's pretty good. It's below average of a teenager. 2 weeks ago, I spent 3 hours and 4 minutes on average a day on my phone. That's up 146%. Not proud of it that week. But then 1 week ago, I guess it dropped 11%. I spent an average on 2 hours and 44 minutes on my phone. Not proud of that. But parents, I encourage you, go on your phone, like just search screen time. It'll tell you that. Have a conversation with your students about that. What is your screen time? Do a little self-reflection there. But what are the things we're learning from social media? Well, based on those statistics, we know that women are spending more time on their phones than men. Um, but it also means that women have higher rates of feeling insecure or critical. And it's interesting that those numbers actually increase once they turn 18. So it's not just a high school issue. It continues into the emerging adulthood years once they graduate. And one really interesting thing about Instagram is that in 2019, they started doing studies at other countries, not the United States, on removing likes on photos. So you could see like people were acknowledging it, but it didn't tell you a number. And they kind of accidentally did that to US Instagram users on March 2nd. I remember being on my phone on March 2nd, scrolling, it said, one person and others have liked your photo. And for the first time, I didn't see numbers on how many likes. And it was curious. But instantly on March 2nd, people freaked out and they were shocked and they were upset that they couldn't see numbers of likes. And Instagram very quickly changed it and took it off. And as a youth pastor, I have some mixed feelings about that. On one hand, I think it's great that in that moment, we didn't compare ourselves to numbers. I would love for numbers of likes to be removed from all social media. I think, yes. But at the same time, even if we remove numbers, it doesn't mean that students aren't still comparing themselves to photos and to others people. I think that's what we need to remember. Just because we might take away numbers, it doesn't stop the fact that students are comparing themselves to other things or people on social media. One really interesting thing about TikTok, which has kind of exploded in the pandemic, it was kind of a pandemic thing. It wasn't that, I mean, it was popular, but not that popular before the pandemic. It's exploded. And part of it's because teens are seeing themselves portrayed on TikTok. They're seeing people with similar interests and likes and tastes of music and attributes and emotions talk about things. They're seeing themselves portrayed. And there's a catch-22 always to that. And now I know, Christy, like you've talked about like learning social media platforms for your students.
Yeah. So, I'm that generation that did not always have the internet. So, as these new social apps roll out seemingly every day, I just can't keep up. And my husband and I have been slow to allow our kids to have devices and apps and social media. And so recently, with COVID especially, it was very challenging for our kids to stay connected to their friends. And so our oldest, our high schooler, had a phone, but no social media whatsoever. And, I kept hearing about the Snapchat. And in my circles, there was a lot of negative information about it, and sending pictures, and then they can be seen, and then they're gone forever. And so how it's being used in a negative way. But man, my son was just asking for Snapchat, that all his friends are using it. So I decided to talk to somebody who knows more about it. And the person I happened to talk to is someone I trust a great deal. And it's my coworker, Kayla, who's 26 years old and has been using Snapchat since she was in high school herself. She's our elementary program director here at West. And so I'm just asking her about it and what do you think? And are these rumors true? These negative rumors I've been hearing about. And she really gave me a lot of information. And I thought I need to ask her to talk to my son. And so we set up a Zoom call with Kayla, Joe, my husband, and I, and even my middle school daughter too was listening in. And she asked Joe what he knew about it, and Kayla shared all the pros and the cons, what to watch out for, some do's and don'ts. And it was awesome. And it really set us up to, with good faith, be able to allow him to have that app. And he had a much better idea of how to use it because of her information. And so in the technology realm, I'd say invite others to give you some strong information and people that you trust, and even to talk to our kids in our place.
And I think that's going back to that discernment word, going back to that again. How do we have that conversations with students? How do you discern what social media, what technology is doing to you? That's a question all of us should be asking, adults equally. What is it doing to us? We got to discern those things. And one other thing, just a conversation we'd love to have is about authentic faith. I want to throw you with a few more stats, one of my favorite things. But these are COVID statistics. We're finally seeing stuff. How is COVID impacting our students? And during COVID-19, when it comes to talking about the church and thinking about the church, 13% of Generation Z says that they feel connected to their local church. During COVID, they feel connected, 13%. 25% said that they feel as connected as they did before. So, okay, that's pretty good. However, 46% of students are saying that they feel less connected to their church since the start of COVID. As a youth pastor, that hurts. That's a prayer I lift up. But then something also really interesting is that during COVID-19, 16% were actually saying, I didn't feel connected before COVID, and nothing has changed. And a response I hear from students often is that when it comes to the church and my faith, I just want to be able to learn how to live it out authentically in this modern world with all these things, different perspectives I'm presented. How do I live out my faith today in the present reality? And I think there's three truths we can encourage among students, and us, Christy and I, as your church leaders, just really try to foster in conversations with students. One is that we need to acknowledge curiosity. We need to embrace the questions and the thoughts and the feelings and emotions that are coming with faith. And just because a student might be asking or questioning God, it doesn't mean they're walking away from their faith. If anything, it means they're critically thinking in a good way and wanting a deeper relationship with God. So don't be scared if a student is asking questions about God. Encourage that. Another thing is to build trust. And with that, we need to build trust in the church about generational leadership. And as parents and leaders, explain the value in church leadership across multiple generations. Explain why there's truth in what the preacher, maybe a couple generations older than your student, is speaking and how it could still speak to them. I explained the value in ushers and elders and the youth pastor in the children's ministry. Explain that and explain how all of that is here as one community to build trust. And then the last thing is encourage students and yourselves to teach expansively. Allow students to see a broad perspective. I love that when it comes to the Bible. There's so many views that are impacted by the Bible, and the Bible is read better in community with people offering their perspectives, not to discredit what's happening, but just to come to the Bible with different life experiences. And our students are seeing this broad perspective of the world. So teach expansively in what your students are seeing.
That's awesome, Blake. So that brings us to, in all these conversations, we have this foundation as parents. We have this foundation of love for our children. And there is a truth that we want to leave you with, a truth about our kids that's unchanging. And if we remember it, it will be a game changer for us during these high school years. The truth is that our kids are made in the image of God. It's so simple, but we often forget to remember it. What if every day, regardless of our kids' attitude, their tone, their actions, what if we remembered this truth about our kids, that they are made in God's image? And what that means is that every kid has the divine capacity to be so much, to believe, to imagine, to love, to care. They have the capacity to relate and trust and be trusted. They have the capacity to reason, to improve, and to lead. And sometimes when I am most frustrated or most disappointed, um, remembering this child is made by God in God's image, it just can diffuse. It can just soften and bring back some tenderness and some truth into the situation. So there's a lot of potential with our kids. And it can be difficult to remember, though, when our kids do things like sneak an outfit to school that we don't approve of, or they're texting late at night in the middle of the night, or they're grumbling at you under their breath. It could be a number of things. Sometimes it's hard to remember that. And the truth is, most days we don't have to be reminded that our kids fall short or that they have a dark side. It's super easy for us to see all the wrong and miss so much of the right that's happening right then and there.
One scripture passage that I'm reminded of is Philippians 4:8. In that passage of, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And I think as youth leaders, as parents, we practice and encourage students to kind of understand this full image of God. And so much of that, going back to discernment, is discernment. Discernment is that process of figuring out these things with God. And for high schoolers, that's helping them discern the usage of phone, technology, relationships, social media, identity, sexuality, mental health, who they are, and what's next for them. And figuring out all these things that Philippians 4:8 talks about, the truth, what is noble, right, pure. It takes discernment, and we should encourage students and ourselves to foster that. And to have that as an ongoing process for ourselves.
Amen. So we're going to leave you with this, again, this truth that our kids and we ourselves, being made in God's image, that it has a ripple effect. And it's something that I think as parents, we can all say is the ultimate goal. And that's how our children go out into the world and then live for themselves and for the Lord. So when we see our kids as being made in God's image, it can change when we're reminding that to ourselves. It changes how we see them. Then that can ripple and it can change how our kids see themselves. Huge. And then another ripple of how they see God. And that's powerful. And then keep it going, how they see God, and then how they relate to the world around them and how they respond to the world around them. It can affect how they make decisions, how they choose to use technology, how they view relationships, how they treat their bodies, how they care for people. When we're rooted in that belief that I'm made in God's image, it can be a game changer.
So parents, as we kind of conclude, feel encouraged, feel confident on the good days and the bad days, that you too are called for this, to love and care for these students. And us as Resurrection, we are praying for you, we are caring for you, and you are loved, yourself and your students. So thank you so much, and we appreciate the conversation. We'll talk to you later.